Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Nourish with Purpose podcast. It's Bailey, and if this is the first time you're listening, hello, welcome. I am so grateful that you are here. If you have been listening to the podcast for a while, thank you again for being here week to week. It means so much to me. If you are enjoying this podcast, really quick, I would just ask that you would leave a rating and or review on either Spotify or Apple Podcast. That just helps out the podcast so much, and I truly appreciate every review or rating that I receive. Today I have on my dear friend Emily. She is a mental health therapist, and she's going to share things all gut-mind connection, supplements you can take to support your mental health, what types of mindfulness practices you could begin to incorporate into your daily habits, as well as what it means to truly align with the work that you're doing and how that can also help prevent burnout and overall just make you feel much more even keel mentally. So it's really packed full of information. That is an area that I don't know a ton about, so I wanted to have somebody on that is an expert in that area, and Emily definitely is that person. Really quickly jumping in to catch up for this week. This weekend we went to the Nebraska football game, and that was really fun. I had not been there since my freshman year of college, which shockingly is already like 5 years ago, which makes me sound ancient, but anyway, it was just really fun to go to the game, got to see some friends before the game, and went with my husband, Nate. On Sunday, we worked on taking apart my fence around my garden, which was just awful. Which I haven't shown any photos because it's just truly embarrassing, but if you have seen my garden, you know that it was quite atrocious. About mid-July, I decided I was kind of done taking care of it. For a first-year garden, it's just so hard to take care of the weeds, and they were unmanageable. And from doing that, starting with seed in February and then doing that till July, I loved every second of it, but at the same time, I was kind of ready to stop taking care of it. So really, I just let whatever was still in there grow, and I had an abundance of vegetables still growing in there, even though it was ugly. So we took down all the fencing. There were so many weeds around the fence, and so my husband then mowed over my garden, and then I'm actually going to be moving my garden to a different area. With it being so close to the field right by our house, my tomato plants just shriveled up and died because of the chemicals being sprayed on the crops, which obviously is not something I can prevent, nor would I ever try. So that just means I need to move my garden to a safer spot, hopefully, where it's not going to get so much of that drift. But other than that, we had a pretty relaxing Sunday. We are getting 60 chickens again this next week. So we went and picked up the huts that they're going to be living in on our yard, and we'll be raising those for the next 4 weeks, which I'm so excited to do again. We did an earlier batch this spring, and now we'll do it early fall. But other than that, how I am nourishing my mind this week is I'm really trying to get back into journaling every single day, and I think this is probably how I'm nourishing my mind every week when I say this, because it is something that I'm so resistant to, and it's what we'll talk about in today's podcast, is just how resistant our body and our mind can be to wanting to do something that forces us to sit with our thoughts. Because it can be so much easier just to put in a podcast, which I'm glad you're doing, but put in a podcast or listen to your favorite playlist rather than just sitting in our thoughts and writing what comes to mind. And so I'm continuously always trying to get better at that. How I'm nourishing my body is I've been making some fall treats, and honestly just felt so inspired to create recipes and share recipes with you guys again. There was a time there where I don't know, it's a lot of work to record a recipe and then post it and edit it and all of that, which I love to do. But there was a while there I felt very resistant to doing that. And I asked on my Instagram story what type of content you like to see, and the number one was recipes, and so that is what I'm going to be doing. So I made some Reese's peanut butter cup, healthier version, I guess you would call it, kind of a protein snack. And then I made a really anti-inflammatory soup. And I'm going to be posting this recipe sometime this week that you're listening to the podcast. It's really just full of so many anti-inflammatory ingredients and spices. And if you're somebody who is bloated, like I talked a lot on last week's episode with digestive inflammation, this is the soup for you. And although it is not the most fancy, I personally think it's delicious, and it really helps soothe your gut. I've also been making my fall recipes like I had mentioned, and so I made a pumpkin pie spice latte syrup, and so I've been putting that in my coffee every morning for the last couple weeks, and really have just felt inspired to light candles that smell like fall and open doors and just get fresh air. It's just such a brisk air in the morning, but then the weather right now has been so comfortable and perfect, and it just makes you want to enjoy every second you can outside. So then how I am nourishing my spirit, I would say that this would be to really find what it is that inspires me and to do more of that. Like I had said with recording the recipes, I've been in such a slump of wanting to do anything like that, and then kind of coming out of that, I feel inspired again, and I'm trying to pick up my hobby. If you don't know, and I don't share a lot about my hobbies, but I make spoon rings, and that's something, shamefully, I have to say, I haven't done since we moved from Omaha to where we're living now, which has been about 3 months. And so I haven't really had a hobby to cling to. I've honestly just worked all the time and then given myself the time to bake and cook, which is something that I just adore so much. But I can't do that forever. And when it's just Nathan and I, we don't need all that food in our house. And so I need to find a hobby that's not cooking or related to being in the kitchen. And so with that, I had started spoon rings. Those are kind of hard to make. They just require a lot of bending. And so I'm finding different materials that I can source to make rings, and I'm just really excited to get back into that. So today my plan is to set up that space so I can get into it and order some of those supplies, because even just doing the research to find a hobby has honestly felt so refreshing. You know, I love what I do work-wise, but when that's all you do, and even when you're cooking, you're thinking about recipes you can post or recipes that you can add into your recipe guides. And, your brain doesn't really ever shut off. And so I needed something totally outside of what I do day to day that could become my hobby. And that's something that I found that I really, truly enjoy. And it's not something I have monetized or plan to monetize. And I think we all kind of need something like that in our lives. Okay, so today, like I said, I have this wonderful episode with Emily. I hope you guys love it. I do want to apologize in advance for my audio. It does cut out just a little bit. Still working on the logistics of recording an episode with somebody through Zoom or a different platform, but nonetheless, there's so much valuable information, and I truly think you'll have so much to take away from today's episode. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's episode with Emily. All right. Hello, Emily, and welcome to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. I'm so excited to get into our conversation today. Just to go ahead and get started, how are you doing?
Good. I'm super good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. Can you go ahead and share just who you are and what you're currently up to?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Emily. I'm a certified holistic health coach and a certified dietary supplement professional. And I also have my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I currently work with clients one-on-one to support them in their wellness journeys. I really believe in supporting clients through the lens of physical and mental health, through the intersection of the two. I know there's so much value in acknowledging how both of these components to our wellness really allow us to achieve optimal wellness. So every single thing that I do is rooted in this philosophy, and it's my greatest passion. So I'm super excited to do it every single day.
I love that. You had mentioned you were a practicing mental health therapist. Could you go more into why you decided to transition from that into doing this type of coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had quite the journey when it comes to my path to where I am today. I don't regret any of it at all, but it was it definitely quite the journey. I had difficulty as I moved through my schooling, through my bachelor's degree and into my master's degree, really trying to understand what it was that I wanted to do. And that led me to making a lot of, maybe, I don't want to say impulsive decisions, but not well thought out decisions. I went to school to get my bachelor's in psychology because I thought, well, psychology is a degree that I can use in a variety of different settings, right? So it really didn't force me to make a decision about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I thought I would deal with that later. Okay. I will preface this too by saying I have an associate's degree in elementary education, which was originally my plan. And that obviously very much changed. So fast forward through my psychology degree, I had started my Instagram page, Eats by Emily. That was back in 2018. And I think as I was finishing up my bachelor's, I realized I really have this strong passion for nutrition and for food. And that was evident through my Instagram and what I was building there. And a girlfriend of mine had suggested, why don't you go to school for eating disorder care, right? For eating disorder therapy. And at the time, I had a very naive understanding of what that meant, right? I thought, okay, well, I love food and I love to talk about food and all that. And I'm also getting my bachelor's in psychology. So this just makes sense. Obviously, in retrospect, I look back at now my greater, more in-depth understanding of eating disorders, and that was not as relevant to food as maybe I originally had thought. So as I was moving through my master's degree and I had to, seek out an internship, I was also starting my holistic health coaching certification. And my intentions there was just, I have no background in nutrition. I have no, none of the sciences that are required for a nutrition degree or a career in nutrition. So I should probably become some sort of certified in some capacity in order to feel qualified for this role. I had no intentions of doing anything with it. I just wanted the education. So through my master's degree, I'm also simultaneously getting certified in my coaching. And come to the last semester of my master's degree, I interned at a private practice that specializes in eating disorder care. And I very quickly realized this is not the place for me, right? This is not what I feel most aligned with. It was evident in both, my misalignment with the work that I was doing with the other clinicians and my supervisor. And then also simultaneously, as I was finishing up my health coaching, I realized, wow, this is what I want. I want to support clients in nutrition and their wellness, exercise and stress management, and all of the components of wellness for the sake of improved mental health and improved physical health. So I graduated and I found a job. Actually, to my surprise, I was looking for positions and I found someone who was interested in nutrition and mental health. And this was shocking for me because I was like, oh my God, there's someone out there that, is interested in what I believe in, right? How food is medicine for our mental health, just as it is for our physical health. I read the listing like 3 times. I was like, am I reading this correctly? Is this for real? So long story short, I applied, I interviewed, I got the job in a matter of like 3 days, right? My supervisor and I, also the owner of the practice, we really hit it off. And it was great. And I was so excited. So I started there July 2021. And I worked there for a year and a half. And over the course of that time, I started to really hone in on my work as a coach. Now we're looking at a year and a half later. I'm bartending still. I bartend part-time. I am seeing quite a bit of growth in my business because at this point, I've now established my LLC. and I'm working with clients in that capacity. And then I'm also working almost full time as a licensed mental health therapist, which includes about 25 to 27 clients a week. So there was a lot happening. And I realized as I moved towards the end of that role before I resigned, I was burning out, which totally steps against my philosophy as a human, right? And self-care and stress management. But I also was realizing I wasn't aligned in the work that I was doing as a therapist, because while I was working for somebody who believed in nutrition as a route to healing, I also had to abide by what mental health care says in our country, right? Which doesn't acknowledge food as medicine, which doesn't acknowledge these non-traditional forms, these complementary alternative forms of medicine, right? And that was challenging because clients would come to me and be suffering, in misery, right? Whether it was depression, anxiety, that was really the bulk of what I would work with clients. And I had this fervent belief about what lifestyle could do for them, and they were just not in that space to accept that or to apply it. And what we know in our education and what we know in our work is you have to meet the client where they are. And if they're not able to take that information and apply it for themselves, you can't force it, right? You can't say, no, but you have to go home and do this, right? You have to go home and stop eating the processed foods and move your body more and prioritize your sleep. There can be suggestions made. We can talk about it, but it was a matter of it was a step away from what we culturally know within our country, right, as being traditional mental health care. I mean, it's the same thing if you were to go to your primary care doctor, right? And if they were to say to you, you should probably, be eating more real whole foods. Yeah, that might happen from time to time, but that's not the norm. The norm is here's the medication, right? So I realized I couldn't do it all. And my heart was really not in that space where I felt like there was resistance to what I wanted to be doing. And that's not to the fault of the role. That's not to the fault of the practice, to my supervisor. If anything, I was in the right spot in order to make those changes in the mental health world. But it was really hard on me when I believed so strongly about something and it didn't align in the work that I was doing, except for what I was doing with my coaching clients. So I resigned in September of 2022, and I had to finish out an 8-week window with my clients where I, discharged them and transferred them to other, practitioners' care. And I finished up in November. And since then, I've been full-time for myself, and I'm also part-time bartending as well. So I know that that's like a long-winded answer, but I feel like it gave like a comprehensive understanding of how things have kind of unfolded and why I am where I am now.
Yeah, no, I love that overview because I think a lot of times too, as we're going through like high school to college to the workplace, it's hard to know which direction to go, and your story truly reflects that, right? It's like I knew or thought I wanted to do this, switched courses, decided to do this. And even when I got to that point, I still wanted to change. I love how you've constantly evolved with your career, instead of just being stuck in one position your whole life or until you retire, never really feeling fulfilled or like you were able to live out what, had been placed on your heart to share with people. When it comes to caring for our mind, I know you talk a lot about nourishing your body and then also nourishing your mind, and foods that can support your mental health. What would some of those foods be?
Oh my goodness, where do I get started? So there are lots of foods that we need to be eating that we are not eating for the sake of our mental health. We want to prioritize lots of color in our diet, okay? And when I say color, I don't mean like a bowl of tricks, okay? I mean lots of real nutrient-dense, whole foods, fibrous foods, phytochemical-rich foods for the sake of reducing inflammation in the body, which obviously you know very well, but for the sake of giving our body the nutritional density that it needs, and more specifically our brain, what it needs to function. So we want all the reds, all the oranges, the yellows, the blues, the purples, right? We want all of that. Especially for brain health, we want blues and purples just because the composition of those are typically what our brain needs to best thrive. But in general, just a plethora of color. We want lots of omega-3s. Okay. Our brain is 60% fat. So we want to be sure we're getting enough omega-3s from our nuts and seeds, our fatty fish. We, need a lot for our gut health. Okay. Our gut and our brain have a bidirectional relationship. And so what happens in the gut directly impacts the brain and vice versa. So when we talk about gut health, we want probiotic foods, lots of fermented foods. So sauerkraut and kimchi and miso. And for prebiotic fiber, we want lots of prebiotic foods. So we have asparagus and artichokes and chicory root. We want lots of antioxidants. That's really nourishing for our gut lining. It's also obviously reducing inflammation. So like I said before, lots of color and nourishing foods for the gut. So things like bone broth and things of that capacity, right, to help nourish the gut lining. So not only are we looking for, reducing inflammation within the whole body, we also want to support the gut, and we also want to lubricate the brain. So those are just a few of the many things that we want to be prioritizing. And unfortunately, just given the nature of the modern American diet, we're not getting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to dive into, so you talked about the gut and the brain. It's that gut-brain axis, I believe, is
Yes.
what typically referred to. Why would you, say that for our mental health that is so important? Like, what's that connection going on there that we really need to pay attention to?
Yeah, so because it's bi-directional, right? Whatever's happening in the gut is going to impact what's going on in the brain, and that's obviously not exclusive to inflammation. It's everything. It's also the fact that 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut, so that's our happy chemical. Lots of other neurotransmitters that are essential for our mental health are also made in the gut. So that bi-directional communication that's taking place is essential. And we know that leaky gut, which is intestinal permeability, when the tight junctures in our gut lining become porous, we know that symptoms of leaky gut are not exclusive to physical symptoms, or maybe even more specifically, not exclusive to just digestive symptoms, but they're anxiety and depression. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going or rather, we'll say they're going to the doctor and getting diagnosed with maybe anxiety or depression, right? But in reality, it's just something with leaky gut, or I mean, even further, it's something with our blood sugar. It's something, with our sleeping habits, right? So it's just overdiagnosis of an issue that an actual nutritional psychiatrist named Dr. Ellen Bora, she refers to it as false anxiety, which essentially is this concept of, it's not to say that it's any less debilitating than what one might consider as true anxiety, right? But it's these hormonal imbalances. It's the sleep deprivation. It's the gut health issues, right? That's generating these symptoms, and our brain is saying, okay, you're anxious, right? This is anxiety. You should probably get medication, or you should probably go to therapy. When in reality, it's just sort of dysfunction in our physiology that's actually generating these symptoms. So, when it comes to the gut, it's so incredibly important because of the fact that so much of our body originates, and so much of our health rather originates within the gut. And that's not just physical health, but mental health as well. So really prioritizing that, I think, would be first and foremost. If you're looking to improve your mental health through the use of lifestyle and nutrition, you're never going to come across anything that doesn't not mention the gut, because it's so pivotal in that relationship.
Wow, that's so interesting. And it's like like too, when you go to the doctor, they might prescribe you a medication, but they're not going to mention, maybe there's something going on in your gut that's contributing to your depression that you should tackle first. And then if you the use of medication, then that would be another option. Preparing those colorful foods, eating the rainbow doesn't mean a bag of Skittles, but means those runs. What would you recommend to somebody who is struggling with anxiety or depression? If making food doesn't feel like something they want to take on, or that seems really difficult for them, what's something they could do, one small step to kind of transition towards working on healing their gut and improving their mental health with food if making food doesn't feel doable for them right now?
Yeah, and I love that, because that is the ultimate paradox when it comes to navigating depression and anxiety. And this is something that I face as a therapist was, especially for somebody with depression, lack of motivation and feelings of hopelessness are symptoms of depression, right? So if you're telling someone, okay, go home and make this meal, right? That's not realistic for someone who's navigating depression or who can barely get themselves out of bed, right? And so it adds a layer of complexity when we're looking at things through a mental health lens. Not to say that it's not also challenging for somebody who's navigating physical health concerns, right? But simply just the fact of if I tell someone, okay, you need to be more active, right? Well, why don't we go for a 10-minute walk every day, right? Because they're navigating maybe some sort of physical health concern. That is definitely, and this is, obviously person to person, it's going to differ, but I would argue that is much more accessible to somebody who's just navigating a physical health concern versus somebody who's really depressed or is feeling, super anxious and is having trouble just getting through the day. So some more bite-sized ways to go about it is just really creating the suggestion at the smallest level as possible, just to establish the habit, right? For example, we know that, getting consistent sun exposure, right? You're getting your vitamin D. That's been connected to being effective for those struggling with depression. So just suggesting, just get outside for a minute, right? Just get outside for a minute. And then maybe tomorrow we can just do 30 seconds, right? Or maybe tomorrow we'll do a minute and a half. But I feel that if we're expecting so much of somebody and we're giving them these larger goals, that for somebody who's just not feeling motivated or navigating just kind of the symptoms that they're experiencing, giving them something that's a little bit more tangible and a little bit more accessible based on where they are, that in and of itself has healing properties, because that compounded over time makes a huge difference. Nutritionally speaking, I would suggest, instead of the expectation that somebody should be maybe reducing the amount of sugar that they're eating or maybe the amount of processed foods, it would just be, just adding one food into their day, right? Okay, what can we add in? Something that's small, because I think adding in is more accessible to someone than it is to take things out. I'd rather crowd out than, kind of expect them to take away certain things. So that would definitely be my suggestion there in that regard. But I think what is most important is meeting the person where they are. And then as a clinician, as a former clinician, and now as a coach, assessing what would be the most relevant to where they are in this journey. And sometimes it's just taking that inch, and that's okay, because eventually you get somewhere. Even if you're just taking a centimeter, you're going to get somewhere.
Yeah, I love that approach, because so much in the wellness space we see, all right, you need to be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, drinking this much water, eating balanced plates every single meal. And you kind of forget, and I forget too, because I'm guilty of this, is there are people struggling with their mental health, anxiety, depression, where even just eating is a task in itself. And so able to then, as a coach, break down really bite-sized pieces, meet them where they are, and then evaluate how you can move forward with, like you said, I love the idea of just sitting in the sun for 30 seconds. Tomorrow, let's try a minute. Then, you're slowly increasing, but it's not all these changes you need to make right now, but it's going to take one small change that feels very manageable for you specifically, and then build upon that. When it comes to our mindset, we've talked about mental health and we know how important that mindset is. And I feel like right now, a lot of people are talking about journal prompts or all these things that you can improve your mindset. For me, I still feel like it's really hard to know where to start. Not even with food, but just nourishing our mind. Maybe that's with self-reflection or journaling. What would you recommend to somebody who's looking to start doing more of that?
My suggestion would be, I guess, I could argue and I could utilize the same example I just suggested before, right? Where just 5 minutes of journaling or 5 minutes of meditation or 5 minutes of deep breathing, right? And building that into a habit, or just 1 minute, right? 1 minute, you can do anything for 1 minute. When I was doing cryotherapy, that's what the man told me. You can do anything for 3 minutes, and I stuck it out, right? So you really can do anything for that period of time. And that obviously compounded over time becomes more of a habit, and then it's more well established. When it comes to our mindset, I think one of the most potent things that we can do as humans is just tune in and become observers of our thoughts. What we know about the mind-body connection and how powerful that is our thoughts can generate changes in our physiology, just as a physical threat can generate a change. So having a stressful, negative, anxious thought can be influential on our physiology, on our nervous system, just as a tiger running towards us, right? And so when we think about that, that's pretty wild, right? That we think these thoughts that maybe we don't even realize are happening is creating the stress response within us, just as if we were in immediate danger because a lion or tiger or a bear is coming towards us, right? Yes, obviously the threats differ in severity, right? We're not going to argue that for sure. But if we just start to tune in more to the thoughts that we're having, we are already so much farther along in addressing and responding to those thoughts than if they just automatically come up for us and we have no idea they're taking place. Part of that obviously has to do with the distractive nature of our society, how we're always doing something or listening to something, or we're doing 6 things at once and we don't really have that opportunity. But if you're really interested in addressing your mindset, I would suggest the first step, outside of just journaling and meditation, mindfulness, something that's a little bit less tangible, is just becoming an observer of what thoughts are coming up, because our thoughts are automatic. We cannot control what thoughts come to our mind. And unfortunately, that causes us to believe that any thought that's coming to our head, we're taking it as truth, right? We're taking it as, okay, well, this must be true, right? Oh, she didn't text me back. No, they probably don't like me, right? And we have to be able to say, okay, well, what's the rationale here? Is this a rational thought? Is this an irrational thought? Is this, a thinking pattern that I can respond to maybe differently? And once you start to get more fluent in that practice, you realize, oh my gosh, I think the statistic is 80% of our statistics or something outrageous. The vast majority of our thoughts are negative. So we have to be able to kind of psych ourselves out a little bit, right? Because if we're having these thoughts and those are then generating what we choose to feel and then how we behave throughout the day, and yet these thoughts are just thoughts, we have much less authority in that until we decide to become observers and then respond to them differently. So that would probably be my first and foremost goal, is to just tune into what's going on inside your head and allow yourself to have those thoughts come up. And that's where meditation is a really powerful practice, because thoughts are going to come up. And meditation isn't about clearing your brain. It's just about acknowledging thoughts that are there. And that can be really telling, especially for thoughts that are recurrent or that are, really, once they happen over and over and over again, we're kind of just numb to recognizing they exist, right? And so developing that awareness, self-awareness, is the key to transformation. Okay. Jen Sincero said that. And I literally say that so many times a day, a week, a month, a year. Awareness is the key to self-transformation. So once you have that awareness, you're going places.
This would be way too much work probably, but to be able to track like what thought is coming to your mind, and then like, is this negative, is this positive, and seeing what your mindset is, even if you didn't track it, but just thought like what that looks like for you. I always think something too that I tell myself, because I am so guilty of assuming like if somebody doesn't text me back, oh, well, they must be mad at me. What did I do? What did I say?
Yeah.
With their feelings, and your mind just spirals. And so questions that I've started to ask myself is this true? Say, well, yeah, I think it's true. Well, is this absolutely true? And you're like, well, I don't know if it's absolutely true. And then the next thought after that is, can I prove that it's true?
Yeah. What's the evidence?
So I feel like that aligns so much with what you just said, of like, we might think or assume that something's the truth, but when we dive more into it, like, can we actually prove that that's the truth? And is it worth, stressing ourselves out over or panicking because we can't really prove that is truth, and that negative thought is just a thought.
Yes, 100%. 100%. That's perfect. That's exactly what we all need to be more conscious of, is finding the evidence for the thought that we're having. And a lot of times we'll realize, okay, there's no evidence to support this. It's just me thinking worst case scenario, which is what we call catastrophizing. That's a cognitive distortion. I mean, you look up cognitive distortions, Google that, and you'll go down that list and be like, okay, yeah, that's me. I do that. Yep, that's me. That's me. And you realize, okay, this is a human tendency. It's human nature, but we don't have to operate by them, right? Which is oftentimes the case. And that's leading us down a pretty negative, unhappy road,
Well, Emily, can you go ahead and set the stage for us? So if you were going to, start meditating, or like, what does it look like in the morning when you do journal or self-reflection? What does that environment look like for you? What tools do you use to help you through that process?
I will preface this and say it has not been an easy road for me to cultivate these practices. So I had a hard time getting to it, right? There's just a lot of resistance there for whatever reason. I typically do it in the morning. I've been getting into a really stronger habit of not touching my phone first thing in the morning. I am a Peloton member, so they offer meditation on the app. So I've been using them. I really appreciate them because they're guided meditations. I'd like to get to a place where I don't need to be guided. I can just, meditate on my own in silence and maybe some calming music, but as I am. Ideally, that's 10 to 15 minutes that I'm meditating. I spend some time journaling. I do some gratitude, but I would suggest doing it obviously in a space where there's no distraction. I personally feel first thing in the morning is a great way to set your day up. You could also do it at night before you go to bed, but you really want to be able to hone in on, especially if there's resistance there, on a time and place and setting and environment that is most conducive to success, right? If you say, okay, I don't want to really do this now, but my 3 children will be up in a couple hours. So I'll wait till I do. I'll wait to do it then, right? I think that there's maybe some resistance there, right? Maybe you're procrastinating, you're avoiding it for whatever reason. So my suggestion would be make it as accessible to you as possible, finding a time that works best for you, and be willing to sit with it, right? Because sometimes it can be really uncomfortable for us to sit in silence or sit in that space, which is why we don't. And we're constantly inundated. I mean, there's people who get up immediately, the TV's on, or immediately they're, listening to music or the radio. And then all day long, we're go, go, go. We're at work, we're here, we're there. And then at night, they fall asleep with the TV on. And never once are we really alone with our thoughts. And that is really harmful because we're not able to tune into them. And so they're just perpetuating, and we're never ever getting to a place where we can actually observe them or sit with some uncomfortable thoughts and emotions, right? Which is ultimately what allows us to grow, right? So that would be my suggestion. I'm not totally sure if that answered the question for you, but those would be like my preliminary first step suggestion: is be willing to feel that resistance, feel that discomfort, and step into it and give yourself like a good starting point, whether that's a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then build from there.
Yeah, that's so good, because a lot of times, like you said, we want to avoid any negative thoughts and we don't want to think about it. Let's put in a podcast while we're walking instead of going for a walk and just sitting with ourselves. Because if you were on your day, I mean, if you pay attention to the times that you spend not connected to your phone, not connected to, talking to somebody in person even, or that you live with, and just by yourself isolated, I think meditation, like you said, is such a good practice in just allowing yourself to feel those emotions and sit with your thoughts. Lastly, I want to talk about the supplements that you use to support your mind, because I know and I see you take a variety of different supplements, and I'm so interested to know what you take and then why you take them.
So supplements are valuable, right? We want to be sure that we're, supporting our body and our brain the best that we can. If we can't outside of nutrition, right? That's what supplements are meant for. They're meant to supplement our lives. Also, as a reminder, you can't out supplement a poor diet. Okay. And unfortunately, the standard American diet, given the way that it is not meeting the needs, right? It certainly is contributing to mental health concerns and mental health symptoms, both in the sense of it's depriving our body of what we need to optimally function. And also it's super inflammatory, right? So it's kind of both not giving us what we need, and it's also causing havoc in our body. So when it comes to supplements, I have a couple, I guess, that we could say are specific to mental health, but also benefit the whole body. So I do take a fish oil supplement that's omega-3. So that's one that I take every day. I do take magnesium glycinate. Magnesium is an anxiolytic. It's the anti-stress mineral. So it's really important when it comes to anxiety and mental health care. And unfortunately, nearly 70% of us as Americans are deficient in it. And it's also readily depleted by stress, by medication. We all ideally want to be ensuring that we're getting enough magnesium. And a lot of times that means supplementing because of the quality of our food and how it's changed over the past several years. It's just not serving us the way that it used to in terms of our minerals. There's a supplement called Become that I also will intermittently take, and that's meant specifically for the gut-brain connection. It has magnesium, it has a probiotic, it has B6, L-theanine, and passion flower. So there's lots of good things in there. Passion flower is big in herbal medicine for being calming. L-theanine has been coined nature's Xanax. So we have lots of good stuff in there. I also take an electrolyte supplement by Peak. And then my greens powder is something else that I take. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. But my greens are by Memory. They are wonderful. They are composed of fermented foods to support our gut health. Lots of antioxidants, really rich in antioxidants for brain health. The product itself was actually created with brain health in mind because the creator has a family history of neurodegenerative diseases. So their intention was, we want a supplement that's out there that supports brain health. A probiotic is important, right? If you want to restore the gut, but I also just try to supplement with probiotic rich foods. I think that's really important. But I think other than that, that's those are the most significant that I feel like are relevant to brain health.
Thanks for sharing that. I know when it comes to the supplement industry, also quality is important. And like you had said, magnesium, which I would assume you believe too, you want to get a lot that you can from food. I always say supplement, not necessarily, but like you would try to get all of those nutrients from your food first and then supplement where you maybe see a gap where you need a little bit more of a boost.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I am such a big believer in getting all of our nutrition from whole foods. I think that should be our first order of business, especially because you're getting the real deal and you're also getting all the fiber and all the other wonderful phytonutrients that are coming from maybe these plant foods or animal-based foods. Animal-based foods, not phytonutrients, but animal-based foods have their own nutritional density to them. But I think it's kind of like nutritional insurance. I've heard that being said before, and I really like that because it gives you kind of like that baseline. Because a lot of times, what we're led to believe from food in terms of, say, you have an ingredient list that says, oh, it has X percent of your recommended daily value. That's not for optimal wellness, right? That's just for meeting a nutritional need. That's like for baseline requirements. So we have to consider all of the impact that's coming at us just based on the modern world that's also compromising our body's ability to receive and utilize nutrition. So supplementing with maybe some of the more prevalent deficiencies or based on your own needs, if you get blood work done and you're able to identify those, but just kind of having like a solid foundation of some of these more important vitamins, nutrients, and minerals, I think that can be really helpful to meet your body's needs and allow it to function the way it should.
Yeah, wow, so much good insight. You know so much about the mind, which I know we were talking about before. That's an area that I lack the knowledge of, right? I work with women to help their relationship with food, but not necessarily the connection of food and the mind, which you know so well. So thank you so much just for being so open to sharing that with us and expand my own knowledge. I feel like I've got so much to take away from this episode. I want to wrap up with the signature question. So on this podcast, it is called the Nourish with Purpose podcast. We talk a lot about how our purpose isn't linked to a specific job or role, but rather it's the characteristics that make up that role that lead us to having a meaningful life. So Emily, what would you say is your purpose?
I think my purpose would be just being a light and being able to connect with people through that strength I think that I have, and being able to serve others with that, right? Because you could see it, right? I get excited. I'm very passionate. It really sets my soul on fire to talk about wellness and health and just quality of life, right? And I feel like adding that layer of being truly authentic and being that light for people, that's inspiring for them. And I think it facilitates a lot of change when they feel my energy and they're able to feed off of that through their own change, right? If I was kind of just like, yeah, well, you could try these things and maybe it'll help you, right? Then that energy is so much different than, okay, you know what, we're going to talk about this and how cool is it that this can, change this and we can integrate this and how do you feel? And oh my goodness, let's celebrate, right? So I value that a lot in myself is my light and my ability to share with others and kind of bleed into others with that light, not only just in terms of health and wellness, but just in life, right? And connecting with others in that regard and really being able to establish those connections. I think that's really, really important for happiness and longevity. I want always to feel like I can give that light to others in both a professional capacity and also in a personal capacity.
You absolutely are a light. And when you're sharing too, you can see how energetic you get about this. And, for people that are struggling with, their mental health, to be able to talk to you. That is your job, maybe, as a coach, but you support that role so well by just being a positive light for those people. And I just wholeheartedly believe that that is your purpose too, Emily.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up, go ahead and plug yourself. Where can people find you, get connected with you?
So on Instagram, I am at _whole with Emily. On TikTok, I am at whole with Emily. And I think that's it. And my website is www.wholewithemily.com.
Awesome. And I will link that all in the show notes as well, so people can find you there too.
Thank you so much, Bailey. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Emily. It was so nice to talk to you today. All right, so before you go, let's go ahead and close this episode in prayer. So, dear Lord, thank you so much for the person listening to this podcast, regardless of if they feel so mentally clear or if they just feel the weight of everything around them and they're struggling with their mental health. I ask that you would just bring healing upon them and that they feel inspired and encouraged today to reach for the foods that are going to nourish their mind and body, or just take a small step, right? Take that inch towards sitting outside for 30 seconds, getting fresh air, and then, really growing upon that as they feel, the inspiration or even just the motivation to do that. I also ask for just healing over whatever it is they are dealing with or struggling with, and that they also don't feel alone, that they feel supported by you and by the people around them to just understand that they have such a purpose here on earth and that they are here for a reason, and that, they are so loved and cared for, and that they just cling to you during this time if they're really struggling in their mental health, and that they know and can feel that you're with them all the time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, and there you have it. That is another episode of Nourish with Purpose. I will talk to you next Wednesday. Bye.